homosexuality. So the person, if I'm coming to make a presentation, I don't know if I'm promoting homosexuality today. So I go to the printer and say, today I'm going to the Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee to present views against the bill. The person who prints, because I was going to promote, because promoting itself is already broadly defined, the printer, the stationer, I all quote already. Chair, I see a member has a question. I'm not the chair. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable. This is why we're here. And Vietuagala. Really, I could go, and I think I pointed out some of the dangers, but page by page, clause by clause, we can have the debates, we can print out voluminous materials, etc. But to close, Chair and members, at the root of this remains that broad danger that legislating out of a moment, a wave of antipathy, of animus, where somehow the public have decided that these people are extremely dangerous and must be dealt with. There's a danger in legislating out in that sense of emotion. It can lead us to treating malaria with chemotherapy and killing the patient, treating indigestion with surgery and killing the patient, whipping up emotion we cannot then contain, and causing fellow Ugandans to be scared in their own country. Yet there are laws that could have dealt with the same issues. Thank you, Chair and members, for listening to me.
Thank you for your presentation. Colleagues, you've listened to Dr. Usinje carefully. But before we proceed, allow me to request one.
Your fears and the fears of anyone here. If we were fixed on one thing, then there wouldn't be a need for us to listen to a multiplicity of ideas. When this bill, as you know the process, when it was given to the committee, we are here to listen to each and every view, idea, or anything, for or against, so that we come up with a law that represents the sentiments, the ideas, the views of every other Ugandan that will have an opportunity to present. I have listened to Dr. Businge Kabumba, convincing as he is. His preamble, he says he's a parent, correct, like we all are, and you would go at length to protect your family. And you have extensively quoted the Constitution. And Article 31, all of it, that protects the family, you do not agree with it. You also agree with me that there are people who are promoting homosexuality, which is illegal. So how else would you want us to handle them? In view that it is outlawed, it is unconstitutional, and you are protecting your own family, how else would you want us to handle them? Thank you.
Thank you.
In the same spirit of my brother here, colleague, you know, Doctor, you have put the point across. But what I also wanted to communicate is that Parliament, specifically this committee which has been designated, in performing its duties is also guided by Article 79. It's guided by that. Parliament makes laws on any matter for peace, order, development, and good governance of Uganda. So, to sum it up and say that we should not legislate following the other particular sentiments and move like a mob, for me, is not correct. Why? The committee has taken the initial steps of engaging all the stakeholders we think can give an input. The legislation is not for a parliament. It's for Uganda as a nation, a sovereign nation at that. I am impressed that you agree that you also detest the vice against your own children. Totally. It is terrible. Yes, you detest the vice against the children. But one thing which I want to also perhaps put across as my view, Doctor, is that we can talk about the big animal called human rights. The unfortunate bit of it is that human rights, we have also tried to codify. We have put it in our Bill of Rights. Now, the challenge is that you have a different section of people who now say human rights is what I feel I should be able to do freely. But we are saying, in our constitution, just demonstrate justifiable in a free and democratic society. Now, not all rights are absolute, you know. They have got some limitations. But now when we say that we impose and create rights as and how we wish, I think also that is not having a society which is organized. So it goes in line with our component that how can we have good governance when we think as and when somebody wishes that it is a right, it is somebody's right. I think that is the issue. And what we are looking at, if you look at the object of the bill, purposely, to be honest, I will not be shy to say that this vice has been ongoing in our country. It's a reality, it's a fact. But where it has reached is that it targets those people who cannot be able to give their consent. It is our children. It is the children. Kabumba, you are an adult. All of us here can be adults. We can make our decisions, what we wish. Whether we want to tear what behind properly, you can tear. You get it? But these are the children. Why are we saying we have to protect the children? It's because we do not have time with our own children. The whole day you're at work, you don't know what is happening to the children. So what do? Do we fold our hands as a community, as a Parliament of Uganda? Absolutely not. So I want to allay your fears that we are going to have a very fruitful engagement with all the stakeholders, and we shall be informed as a committee with a decision that suits Uganda as a country. Thank you.
Thank you. But it goes even us, even those who are for or against. It's possible that they can also be colleagues. Let's just be free. Let's have a healthy debate, a healthy discussion, a conversation over this. We all accept and acknowledge that there is a problem. The question is, how do we handle this cancer, this problem that we have? And I think that is what Honorable Okirol asked you. Now, you're saying we shouldn't enact a law, yet we acknowledge that it's a problem. How best can we address this? I think that is a pertinent question. Yes, both of them asked that question. I think that is very pertinent. But Senior Buturo, we do take into account whatever you've said. And of course, as a committee, we shall have all those considered.
Chair,
yes?
Chair, I want to implore people as we have the discussion, our dear visitors do.
This is good. See, when I came here at the start of my presentation, I made a number of points. And Chair, you said, open it to see. I'm glad that Honorable Nsawa Buturo has come and disabused us of the notion that there is no preconceived minds. So that now that we're clear, let us talk. You see, let me also use the word nonsense. The nonsense of characterizing people who don't disagree with you as somehow having been bought, it's nonsense. I am Busije Kabumba. I'm an African. I said at the beginning, and I'll repeat it again, as God is my witness, I have not received a single cent to come here. I'm gainfully employed. As I said, I'm senior lecturer of law at MUK University. I draw a salary from the public. But Chair and members, I'm not at MUK because I'm unemployed. I'm there by choice, by sacrifice. And I can say this because it goes directly to what the honorable member said. As far back as 2017, and I have it on record, I have a letter addressed to me by former President Festus Mohai, inviting me to go and be legal advisor, senior legal advisor to the Juba peacemaking process. The letter said $10,000. Come and assist us. At Makera at the time it was 2.5 million, now it's 5 million. $10,000 is 35 million shillings. I said no. So that because I feel I have a duty, what I'm serving, simply because we don't clothe it in religious language, doesn't mean that we're also dedicated to our people and this country. So the nonsense of assuming that anyone who doesn't agree with you, as somehow been bought by others, should stop. Don't try it with me. It can be tried with others, not with me. Now that we're clear on that point, that we can have a discussion as Ugandans.
Maybe for record purposes, some of the words that we are using, I wanted to stop Senior when he was submitting. No sense. I think that is not
Thank you,
in
Chair.
order.
Thank you, Chair. Most obliged. And I seriously, members, let's not make assumptions that simply because someone disagrees with me, somehow they've been bold. I cannot be afforded by anyone. I am Sinika Wumba, I'm an African, I'm an Ugandan. I said I'm a father, I'm a Muchiga. I'm here to say what I feel, what I know, and no one will stop me from saying it. I say what I think without fear or favor. Now, in that spirit, Chair and members, and that's why I said really at the beginning, I really thought whether I should even come or not, because why come to talk to people who have their minds made up? But I said, look, I'm here for the record or for posterity. Now, of course, we can have a reasoned debate about an agenda which targets African values, African customs, or even African interests. And indeed, seeds and crops have done that work. Vaccines and medicines, access medicines, as far back as 2009, the Human Rights and Peace Center was carrying out research on access to medicines, generic medicines, ensuring that Africans and Ugandans can have access to medicines that are being under patent protection. Those concerns we share. So there's none of us here who has moral superiority over the other. Now, when we come to this question of, so the issue that Chair and members have discussed is, and from the beginning, and honestly, Chair and members, it's bad manners for someone to come in, not having listened to representation, and then seek to respond to it. It's also bad manners.
Sidia?
Chair, I am not comfortable to sit here to listen to a diversionary lecture from Doctor. Kindly request through you, Chair, that Dr. Respect.
The floor has taken my remarks personally. I was giving a general overview of the situation we are facing. It is interesting and great interest that he takes it personally. That should be noted, Mr. Chair.
That is noted. Please, there's nothing.
The Bajiga was saying that he who is stronger than you rapes your mother and kills your father. Says abuses you and says don't take it personally. But Chair and members, let me go to the issue. Now, the idea that religion, and I'm now going to the point of the basis of religion and the battle over religion. Chair and members, it is true that one of our constitutional crises or constitutional questions is the role of religion in lawmaking. And Chair and members, as I said before, that is the history behind Article 7 of the Constitution, which is clear, unless we want to amend it. Article 7 says, Uganda shall not adopt a state religion. And Chair and members, I say, this doesn't mean that Ugandans cannot be religious. It's only that we cannot and should not get a dominant religious view. And I went through the 10 Commandments. I labored, Chair and members, I labored, and explained that of the 10 Commandments, only 3 of them are crimes, and those 3 which are crimes are based on harm. And that if we start penalizing envy, penalizing honoring mother and father, we go down a path that is inconsistent with Article 7. And in fact, before I take leave of this and go to the last points, Chair, Article 7 is rooted in the history of this country, the religious battles that ended up with a hegemony where Anglicanism is up, Catholicism number 2, Islam is number 3, and our indigenous, we're talking about Africa now, our indigenous traditional beliefs are actually criminalized. Chair and members, you may see me coming here next month to discuss the idea that in Africa, in an African country, the only religion which is criminalized is African traditional belief. There's a law, the Witchcraft Act, that criminalizes indigenous belief. So if I talk about African values, let's have a holistic conversation about African values. But finally, Chair and members, the questions that were posed by the members who listened to me before. And of course, they are fair questions.
Doctor, you have made reference to Article 7.
Yes.
It is very clear.
Yes.
We shall not adopt state religion.
Yes.
What is your understanding of religion?
Religion, of course, is the idea in a being or lack thereof, or beings. So it's to do with spirituality and your views, the world view about a particular, how we relate to creator or creators. So it is about the things that we cannot even know. That's why St. Paul says faith is the substance of things
Now
hoped
I
for.
want to request you, in the
Yes.
context of our discussion
Yes.
of the law before us,
Yes.
and the vice we are talking about, how
Yes.
do you relate that element of what you have just explained?
Okay, now, I'm sure yesterday, a lot of the submissions you received, I was not here, but I suspect the word Sodom and Gomorrah came up, Leviticus, yes, but I'm sure, yes, no, but you see, that's the thing. You see, I'm sure Sodom and Gomorrah, Leviticus, and all this, and I'm sorry about this. But you see, simply because this thing does not say Christian or Islam, doesn't mean it's not inspired by or founded upon religious values. And I'm saying that it is okay to be religious. That is the constitutional right under Article 29. But I'm saying that we also have to contend with Article 7 that says Uganda shall not adopt a state religion. And that what it means that our laws and legislation must be based on rational public policy. And the clearest public policy is the question of harm. And I said from the very beginning, and that's why, again, I say it's not good to respond to things you haven't listened to. I'll be the very first person as a father to protect my children against anyone who dares harm them, including through the mechanisms. So the question that we have, members and chair, is whether this is the best way to address the issues. And that's why I made reference to curing malaria with chemotherapy and killing the patient, or curing indigestion with surgery and killing the patient. So the legitimate questions that were raised is, again, Honorable, you talked about, so children, the protection of children. How do we balance? So the question of Article 43 and the balancing there. And it's one of the most critical articles that we have in the Constitution, because it tells us how to balance the rights of sections of the public. And so Article 43 says, public interest shall not include any limitation that goes beyond what is acceptable and demonstrably justifiable in a free and democratic society. So going back to the question of numbers and majorities, the framers of Constitution could have said in a democratic society. They found it important to add free and democratic society, meaning that as we speak now, Uganda is a liberal democracy. It is not just a question of the ayes have it, 95%. It's a question as to whether the legislation is consistent with the values of liberty in a plural society where we cannot all have the same views. I mean, apart from then suggesting that the person who eats pork, somehow he has been bought to eat it. We can actually disagree. It's possible to have diversity in society that is good faith. And in this plural society, chair and members, the test is Article 43. Freedom, liberty. And really, it goes back to these values that your rights stop where mine begin.
I think, Doctor, for some of us who were here,
yes, the points were made.
We listened to you,
Okay.
you made your point,
Thank
but
you.
I just want you to
summarize.
You were saying that our clause 13
Yes.
is not necessary, according to you. The one on same-sex marriage. And according to you, it is already catered for under the Constitution.
Yes.
I want you to read that Constitution.
I've
You
read
see
it. I read it. I know this. I teach it since 2009.
Yes.
Article 31
Can
says marriage between persons of same sex prohibited.
can anyone be charged under the Constitution?
You see, and this is a very important point you raised, Chair. Technically speaking, but I don't want to scandalize you, but technically speaking, that Article 31(2)(a) is inconsistent with the tenor of Chapter 4. And that's a whole debate for another day. It's an entire debate for another day. And of course, it's contestable. It is.
So do you agree with us that clause 13 is operationalizing that provision
Well, to the extent that it continues
to appear in the Constitution?
it is very much like Article 269. Not everything in the Constitution is constitutional. There used to be an Article 269 that said Uganda was one party
Well,
state.
let's forget about that argument.
That's why I said
whether-
that we need to come back another day and we discuss the idea that not everything in the Constitution is constitutional.
So what
Yes,
I'm saying
yes,
isn't
that-
clause 13
Yes.
operationalizing Article 31
Chair,
to A?
Chair, it operationalizes an article which, in my view, respectfully, members, is inconsistent with the letter and spirit of the broader. In other words, it's inconsistent with the basic structure. Malema, Vice Attorney General and others. It's inconsistent with the basic structure of the Chapter 4. But again, I know this one now introduces a whole different dimension. I'll annoy you, you
Well,
will slap
like,
me,
like
you'll
you've
abuse
said,
me.
we shall have another day.
Yes.
We shall have a debate on
Yes.
whether that one
Yes.
disorganizes the entire structure of the constitution or whatever.
Yes.
It's another
But,
issue.
yes.
But I just wanted to bring it to your attention that clause 13
Yes.
basically just operationalizes Article 31 2A,
Okay.
notwithstanding your issues whether it is constitutional or not.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes, Chair.
Council.
Very critical. He went to the definition of homosexuality.
Yes.
It had actually skipped my mind.
Yes.
You went to the definition and pointed out that aspect of sexual activity.
Yes.
Now, when he pointed out the aspect of sexual activity, that's where he said perhaps
Sexting.
looking, sexting.
Giggling.
But I think, Doctor,
Yes.
in the construction,
Yep.
not only the Constitution,
Yeah.
or even the Acts of Parliament, we are guided by rules of interpretation. Now, if we used the purposive approach, wouldn't it be a solution to what would be? Because for me to understand the sexuality in it,
Yes.
what is envisaged could be even touching the genitalia of some other person.
Yeah, true. But you see, by the
Yes.
challenge as framed now, and even talks about the slightest touch. It's there. The slight. It's a law designed to ensure, and goes back to page 1 of objectives. No space, no window at all whatsoever.
I think that will not do more harm. The sexting may not have been. Thank you,
But they are saying touching of another's breast,
Yes.
touching someone's vagina,
Yes.
penis,
Yes.
or anus.
Yes. No, not really. It's easy.
Well,
many
Doctor,
problems.
we have had enough time.
No, just one, because there are two
Allow
questions.
me invite.
Just, Chair, 1 minute, okay, just 1 minute. Peace, order, and good government. It's a very important point. That Article 79 asks Parliament to legislate for peace, order, and good governance. But this is a very historical. It's a historical section. It goes back to Article 12 of the 1902 Order in Council, where the Commissioner was empowered to legislate for peace, order, and good governance. And guess what, Chair and members? Under that broad terminology, we had the detention, the deportation ordinance, the removal of undesirable natives ordinance, the witchcraft ordinance. This is one of the most dangerous clauses and most broadly applied clauses that has resulted in several draconian legislation. So,
Doctor has presented.
Nazir
Those are his views. Colleagues, as a committee, we shall have time to look into his submissions. Professor retired. We are used to Dr. Sylvia.
Thank you very much.
I know majority of us went through your hands here. We are in a position to tell whether you've been bought or not, because we listened to you severally, and at least we can be in a position to tell. But kindly, like I said, colleagues, let's present without any fear, because nobody is here to judge the other time, because we have so many stakeholders here. Dr. Businje took a lot of time, but well, you're welcome. And now that you're our
Doctor's presentation, are there other copies?
Chair, and good morning, honorable members of the Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. President Museveni appeared on BBC's Hard Talk on February 23rd, 2012, and said something very profound, and I quote, "Homosexuals in small numbers have always existed in our part of Black Africa. They were never prosecuted, they were never discriminated. What happened in African tradition was that the homosexuals would be known, it would not be approved, but would be ignored. It would be their private issue," end quote. Now, the panel of medical experts that the president set up in 2014 to advise him on the earlier bill agreed with his position when they reported, and again I quote, "In every society, there is a small number of people with homosexual tendencies," end quote. So, honorable members, same-sex relations, cross-dressing, and transgenderism have always been part of humanity and certainly well known in Africa. Indeed, there are numerous examples around the continent, and I'll be very happy, Honorable Chair, to share some of my research on that issue with you. But I want to show you just a few images to demonstrate what I'm talking about. On the left is an image of a cave in Guruve in current Zimbabwe. And on the right is an enhanced image of what is shown in these ancient cave carvings, which depict men having sex with men. Nothing to do before, way before Europeans came here. Same-sex erotics in ancient Egypt depicted in ancient art. These are pictures of our people here, showing men wearing earrings with cornrows in their hair, necklaces, and this one has a very good hairstyle from Karamoja. From these, so when you hear people talking about these things are an African, this is a Muganda man with a necklace, a head gear, and what looks like a dress made out of backcloth. So I just... No, because I'm talking about this Honorable Chair, because of clause 21D. 21D, if I can borrow you, which says, a person commits the offense of homosexuality if the person holds out as a lesbian, gay, transgender, a queer, or any other sexual or gender identity that is contrary to the binary categories. So just their identity is being criminalized. That is my point. Should the sexual abuse of children be punished? Absolutely. Should their recruitment in sexual acts be punished? Absolutely. Should rape be punished? Absolutely. Both heterosexual and homosexual abuse of children and sexual assaults must be punished in the harshest possible way. In fact, the Penal Code, as amended, deals with these issues very effectively. So does the Sexual Offences Bill, which this Parliament itself passed recently. All Ugandans agree that pedophiles have no place in a civilized society. But let's not make a mistake. Pedophilia and homosexuality is not the same thing. And it's well established, Honorable Chair and members of the committee, that the majority of pedophiles are heterosexual. So it is against our African ethos of Ubuntu, or Ubuntu as we call it in Uganda, when we legislate basically to disappear the identity of a section of our population, or when we penalize a victimless crime. However much we may hate their actions, however much we find them disgusting, we really cannot disappear our fellow citizens. In Long Walk to Freedom, Nelson Mandela condemned bigotry, discrimination, and exclusion as non-African. Even though in the 60s, 50s, and 70s, he condemned homosexuality, as president, Nelson Mandela argued for inclusion and demarginalization, and indeed, South African Constitution became the very first one in the whole world to explicitly outlaw discrimination based on non-conforming sexualities. Honorable members, do not introduce sexual apartheid or McCarthyism in Uganda. Dr. Kavumba talked about McCarthyism. During the 1950s, American Senator Joseph McCarthy sowed fear and hatred by accusing several people of being communists, the most hated label that could be thrown at you during that time. Today we hear people are being bought, being thrown at people like us. The lives of politicians, authors, actors, scholars, journalists, name it, were shattered by a claim with no basis. Hundreds lost their jobs. They were ridiculed and condemned by their neighbors and friends. Some even committed suicide as a result. And that is what this law is going to do. I wish to end my very brief submission with a cautionary word to honorable members of this committee and of Parliament. Honorable Amama Mbabazi was the principal author of the Public Order Management Act in 2011. When he contested for presidency in 2016, it was his POMA that the government used to stop him from moving around the country and campaigning. Don't be surprised when this law comes back to haunt you one day. All it takes is a whispered accusation from a political rival to claim that you are gay or that you promote homosexuality. A few photoshopped pictures are enough to condemn you, not simply to a lost election, but to a monetary fine, to jail, and community shunning. So such mud that has a way of sticking, just like the mud of they are paid to do this. It has a way of sticking without any basis, but it sticks. And whether or not you are innocent does not matter. The damage will have been done. The anti-homosexuality bill is the perfect tool to end the political career of any one of you, whether you are or you're not LGBTQ+. Thank you.
Dr. Prof, thank you very much for your presentation. And I imagine from your presentation, you don't find anything useful to add to this bill. At least Doctor made a comment against it. He went ahead and took us through what, if the bill is to be passed, what at least must be considered. Doctor, would you do us a favor and find anything that you feel, assuming, okay, we are not persuaded, and we go ahead and consider this bill. Is there anything that you would imagine?
Honorable Member,
on the
Honorable
contents?
Chair, I don't think that that bill is necessary because it is duplicating. We already have bills, as I've stated, which deal with the problem that we have, which is taking advantage of children. We already have that law. So in my view, this bill should be scrapped. It should not be given the light of day.
Colleagues, Doctor has talked about the sexual offences bill that was passed by this parliament. Perhaps I'd gone on a holiday.
It's yet to be signed by the president, but it was passed, wasn't it?
Was it passed? No, it wasn't.
She changed her mind now to...
No. It was passed. It's true that it was passed, returned by the president, and you're using the word lapsed. So what does that mean? Exactly.
It should be reintroduced. Whoever is interested should reintroduce it.
Okay, so that law will deal with...
It's not long. It's not law. It's not. It's
okay.
not.
The penal code as it is enough. It deals with these issues. Even
Okay.
forget about that bill.
Okay. Yes?
You know, it's always very, very interesting to listen to your teachers, to listen to people who actually mentored you into the legal profession. You would be at pains to disagree, at least entirely. But let me ask Professor Tamare. You aver that this law is not necessary. But at the same time, you protect your family. You said in absolute terms that anybody touching a minor should be penalized. From the existing laws that we have in our penal, in our statute books, where do you find we should increase or make it more stringent to protect the minors? But also you are aware that we actually have people who, although we have had it, as you quoted from President Museveni, there are people meant on promoting this vice. How do you want us to handle them? Especially targeting the minors whom you protect so dearly.
Section 129, I think, in the Penal Code is very, very harsh on anyone who sexually abuses a child, anyone below 18. It's very, you cannot make it harsher. Now, on the issue of promotion, as Dr. Kavumba said, it is very broad. It touches, promotion means anything. You're just talking about it can be interpreted as promotion. So unless you're harming anyone by promoting, like for instance, abusing them, or as a pedophile, otherwise promotion. What does promotion mean? It can very easily be abused. And earlier, Honorable Sauturo said that the Western world, and I'm quoting him, the Western world has nothing to teach us. It's about our morality. And I'm asking that the biblical morality,
and he appreciated all the lectures, and you will never disagree with you at any.
Yes, I'm just saying that the religion and the Bible and the Quran actually, which tend to be the basis of our arguments, as Dr. Absinje said, are actually the ones that are un-African. And the fact, it is true, the fact is that Africans tolerated people like this, however disgusting they found them, as President Museveni said. But they did not throw them over Msikisizi Falls.
Yes, Honorable Kirol.
I want to thank Professor for the spirited presentation. I want to make a comment. You made reference to what President Museveni alluded to when he made that statement in BBC. He would say this would be their private issue. You see, this would not be an issue which you bring out to the open, isn't it? Now, the biggest thing which I want all of us to come from up there and appreciate that there are people who are fighting for space now. It's no longer a private issue. That's why we shall now have a problem. Where it ceases as being private, it now becomes a public issue.
In which sense?
A public issue in this, you even get the content, there are even cartoons, which conduct the vice. It's a bit different. It's no longer private. People are advocating for space for recognition in nowadays. We would have no issue with privacy. But where the extent that it is taking is seeking public recognition, to the extent that we are saying it's a human what? Right. Caesars being what? Private. Now, that is where we take issue. Now, if Caesars being private, it now becomes something openly done in public, and we are saying now that has exceeded a bit the limit that the president understood that we can tolerate to the level of privacy. But where it now comes openly and it goes that massively you're doing the recruitment. All of us here have agreed that recruiting the children and the rest is totally wrong. We are saying it is wrong. Even you, Professor, you'll say it is wrong. Absolutely, you alluded to that.
For, yes.
Now the issue is where somebody wants to even celebrate a marriage. You get those things. It is seen as being private. That is where we are all saying that can we put ourselves in the confines that we think, but we don't come out to look at Kabumba's children, Professor's children. We now want to recruit them. Even all of us will rise up in arms and say, no. Society transforms from the old times that Uganda was a British protectorate. We have transformed and moved. And over a period of time, we cannot have static legislation. We legislate according to the times and events as they manifest. The legislation of 1902 may not be applicable as of date. There was no Wi-Fi, there was no what. So we're now saying, how do we curb such that we all enjoy our space?
Thank you very much.
Now, so that is a context. Then the last thing I want to comment on, the word of caution from Professor. Professor, these members of parliament you see here took the oath. We took the oath as elected leaders of this country without fear or favor. Ours is to legislate. Whether there is a law or there is no law in Uganda, if there is no law and they say, Professor, you are gay, you are homosexual, the same community will shun you. When there is a law, the result is the same, isn't it? Kabumba said 90 what? 5%. 95%. I've looked at the math. Whether there's a law or there's no law, the effect is the same. The photoshopping can be the same. Even now, without the law, Professor, if you say that I'm doing homosexuality in a village, you see, Fox doesn't do it. Even if he talks about it, he doesn't. I hope so. You get it? But you see, the effect is the same. But must we as legislators, the issue is one, must we as legislators put down the weapons and say we should not legislate for the betterment of our community? I think that would be a wrong approach for us to shy away from our responsibility and duty. But we thank you for the caution, but we should not, as a parliament of Uganda, the 11th parliament at that, shy away from our responsibility. So all the views will be accommodated. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much.
I love it when they always refers to POMA. That's a serious caution, that whatever we do, should not tomorrow will catch up with us.
Then another thing, just the last one. You see, the laws we make, we don't make it for only people outside. We make them for all of us, including us who are making. So we are very cognizant of the fact that we are part and parcel of the legislation we are passing. Whether it is passed, I know I can also be a victim or not. Applicability is across. Thank you.
Tamale has interestingly made a selective quotation of President Museveni. If she had continued with that quotation, there is where the president says never, 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 in the same address. But selectively, interestingly, she picks on the introductory remarks. And if she has the full quote, I would invite her to give it to us. She will find that the president is saying we are not going to allow this situation in our land. Secondly, I recall when I was Minister for Ethics, we had running battles with Professor Tamale and her team, who clearly were strong defenders of homosexuality and their rights. And she's clearly on record as an eminent defender of this group. But the message then and still now is, every society must have standards. Every society must have do's and don'ts. The idea that it's a free-for-all invites a situation where next time our friends from the Western world will say, you man, you can marry your mom, it's provided you're all adults and you choose to sleep together. That moment is likely to come. We already have a situation where bestiality is now a growing movement. And first, you're Africans. There will be many who will be saying, yes, it's our right to sleep with our animals. It's coming. There is that trend coming. And historically, you have people who clearly facilitate that thought in every society. So I would wish to really bring the team to a situation where we are saying that Ugandans must have standards. Like you have standards in your home, and children grow up knowing their do's and don'ts. If you do wrong, you get punished. Those standards must be there. The majority of Ugandans, in our view, are saying no, no, no to homosexual practices. It is true that this group has been around really for as long as we can imagine, but it has not come out. What's happening now, it's coming out because of pressures from the Western world, who clearly are under the control of homosexual forces, and they want us to do the same. We must be careful that because it's happening there, we too should succumb to that pressure. We must have our standards and our values.
Okay, Doctor, that is noted. Honorable Santa, then Honorable.
Chair, I want to thank the professor from the first remarks and the conclusive remarks that she made, ending by cautions to us as members of parliament. But I would like to start from the quotation that you made, attributing it to the president, and you said, I'm now trying to summarize, that the president said homosexual existed in Africa. I'm summarizing way back, in their small numbers. And they were ignored. True? Yes, if they existed, if the President Museveni said they existed in their small numbers and they were ignored, but time do change. And what are we faced with now? They are no longer in their small number, as the President remarked. Are you trying to tell us that because the President said they existed in small numbers, but now we are seeing them in big numbers, we should ignore them? That is my first area of clarification. Then two, Chair, I came in when Doctor was responding. Doctor, thank you. I respect you for your views, though they are completely different from mine. Even as we have been receiving witnesses here, they are saying the penal code addresses this. But as Parliament, on top of the penal code, we have been passing a number of laws. And Professor Tamale, right? You even alluded to this, and you went further to say we also passed the sexual offenses. Assuming it was passed and the President assented to it, and to you, together with the penal code, that would be adequate. Now, Chair, I want to marry this, that yes, the penal code exists, but still Parliament is passing laws. Why? Parliament comes to pass law when there is a problem in the society. And this new bill before us is rising to that occasion. That even when we had the penal code, still there are so many other laws that we have passed. Because some people are arguing that the penal code is enough. Yes, we are having a problem. And times is changing. And we cannot fold our hands and we look on. Chair, the majority of Ugandans, I'm aware of what the Constitution talks about, but the majority of Ugandans out there do not want to hear this issue of homosexuality. One of the reasons being is because we need to protect our children. And I now want to marry this with your last submission, conclusive submission, when you were cautioning us. Yes, I want to agree with you. And I also want to agree with you that I was in Parliament when the Right Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Babazi, really disturbed us with this bomber. And the law caught up with him the first, as far as members of Parliament are concerned. So I want to agree with you to that effect. But we swore. And when we come here and we make the law becomes blind. Tomorrow it doesn't look at anybody. Whether you were supporting or not, the law will catch up with you. So, my last question to you is, must we ignore the problem, the cry of the majority of Ugandans, the children who are suffering, the many children who are being recruited everywhere, left and right? Must we ignore because the law will catch up with us and then we fold our hands? And finally, I'm a Christian. God created us to continue with his work of procreation. And this affects that very intention, divine intention of God. Now, must we ignore that as members of Parliament because of the reasons that I've enumerated? Chair, I want to conclude by saying, as members of Parliament, we have to do things on behalf of the people. We have to do things which are acceptable. We have values as Ugandans and as a country.
Honorable Sant, I propose that some of those submissions will be at the level when we are now. Because when we assure the members here, they may say, you're justifying Dr. Usinje's statement that he came well knowing that we are all of our minds are fixed and...
No, Chair, I want to, for him, when I joined you in the meeting, he was very clear on his standing. My being a member of Parliament does not remove my perception. Of course, all of us will not think the same. Even if I wasn't a member of Parliament, I would still be entitled. And I am entitled to my view. It doesn't mean that I'm going to jump over the committee on the legal. I will jump over the Parliament because we are just doing work as a committee for the whole Parliament. And this report will be taken to Parliament. Yeah. So me as Santa, I'm not going to jump over and say, this is what I feel, this is what I think, it must be like this. No. I also have my right to speak of my mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable John, the Yango Doi.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank the professor for her submission. I wanted her, Professor, you said that the penal code handles all that this bill is trying to handle, and therefore the bill is unnecessary. What I wanted to ask from you, since you're an expert in the field, does the penal, and you talked about promotion, and that promotion can mean anything. Don't you feel that as legislators, we, in our plight to protect the children, we had a number of witnesses come here. Some of them were recruited as young as 12, some were recruited later, but still below the age of 18. So don't you feel we need to have a law that prohibits, especially organizations that go in to recruit and encourage other young people to recruit others in this? It's the same as heterosexual. If there was an organization encouraging young people to recruit in sexual activity, it would be a problem. And so, since in Uganda, this is what we're facing right now. We've had a lot of this issue in the schools. Some of the witnesses here told us that they were part of those organizations that were promoting and recruiting. So, don't you feel there needs to be a law that handles that particular aspect where we can define what is promoting so that there's clarity? Promoting might not necessarily be putting a picture, but promoting might be an organized way of encouraging and recruiting young people. So does the penal code deal with something like that? Because that's what we're facing right now as per some of the witness information that we received. So do we have a law that stops organizations and individuals from doing that? That's what I would like to ask you. And then, yeah, that's what I can contribute to this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have something very urgent to handle. Let me hand over to Honorable Kutesa. For only a few minutes, I'm coming back. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You may go ahead and make your...
Thank you, Chair. Professor, I wish to also draw your attention to your point number 1, where you made reference to the remarks by President Museveni. You went ahead and indicated here that homosexuals were in small numbers, have always existed in part of Black Africa. They were never prosecuted. They were never discriminated. You clearly indicated here that then, 2012, they were in small numbers. 2012, today we are in 2023. And the mover of the motion indicates that now this number has gone so high. You also went ahead and indicated that homosexuals would be known. It would not be approved, but would be ignored. It would be their private issue. But we are aware that this is almost now becoming a lifestyle. Don't you then think that there is a need to at least make legislation against the number that is growing? There is also reported aggressiveness in recruitment. Now, if the same is proved, don't we think it is now the right time to try and pass legislation to mitigate the recruitment? We are living in a generation of social media, where by click of the phone, you will have message reach millions of people. There are reports of cells being created and our young people being lured using finances and some other offers extended to them. Don't we then think it's the right time perhaps to have legislations to curtail the same? Then in your conclusion, I wish also to comment on your cautionary word to the members of the committee, where you referred to the Right Honorable Amama Mbabazi and the POMA. By cautioning the members, are you not setting a bad precedent that when a matter might in a way affect the members of a committee, they should then be very selfish to first think about themselves before legislating for the wider country? Thank you.
Coming in late. Professor, a few questions. Promotion of homosexuality. In my experience, the most promoted lifestyle is sexual or is heterosexual sex. From the time I was born, I was taught at home. When I attended catechism classes in church, I was taught that the only right way to have sex is by way of heterosexual sex. This is taught in schools. Every Sunday I go to church, it's the same story. What do you think is the reason for this fundamental fear of any discussion of homosexual sex among the heterosexuals? Why do they brand? But before I ask that question, some bit of a background. If a heterosexual man, and I don't want to use examples, seduces a woman, is seduction. The younger generation call it conning. And lastly, okay, Ron, why are you complaining? The Honorable Okeron took issue with. Can I conclude this? The Honorable Okeron took issue with marriage, privacy. He was addressing privacy, and his submission was. Why do homosexual men express love in public? And my question is, the heterosexuals get married in church, in public. Then they have sex in private. Why should we apply different standards to homosexuals, to the LGBT community? I thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Fox. Do we have anyone else who would like to say something?
Honorable Chair, I want to children, and I said, I was asking, is there a specific law that prohibits recruitment of children in sexual acts? So Fox, don't confuse recruitment.
There's someone else, I think.
With
Honorable Joe, and I agree with you entirely. Children should never be.
To respond, Professor Tamale, but thank you so much for the submissions, honorable colleagues. I'll also just add my few remarks that this is a very heated and very emotional bill that we're trying to address. And I'd just like to allay the anxiety of our people here, our presenters today, that when we sit back in private, we will look very critically at the terminology that we will use in crafting this bill, to bear in mind that we are listening to the voices of our people, the majority, but we are not excluding the minority. So that should help you understand that we are listening to all Ugandans, and that we will take special care on how we craft the wording to make sure that our laws protect our majority, but do not affect the minority of Ugandans. But please go ahead and respond. Thank you.
Thank you. Vision and mission, Parliament, people-centered Parliament, better quality of life for all Ugandans. But let me try to answer the questions that were asked. When I started my presentation with President Museveni's quote, I was not suggesting in any way or trying to show whether President Museveni is against or for the law or homosexuality. All I was saying, I was responding to people who say that homosexuality is un-African, that this is brought in by Europeans. And that was all. I was trying to show that, to refute that un-African argument. Now, on the issue of whether we, the majority of Ugandans, 95%, I don't know where that figure came from, are against homosexuality. And indeed, it may be true. But the majority of Americans were against racial equality, and they were for segregation. I think in life, there are certain fundamental issues that cannot be put to a referendum. And one of those is the lives of people who have not harmed anyone and are just being who they are. You cannot put that to a referendum and say, should we or not? It is simply wrong. This is a fundamental. So for me, I don't care whether it is one person who is a homosexual, that person has a right to be on this earth, like you and me. And I think it's an abuse of power to say that they don't have a right to exist, like this law is saying. Somebody, an honorable member asked about POMA being, if a law is going to, in future, affect us, should we stop legislating? Absolutely not. I use the POMA example as an example of a draconian law, because in my view, POMA is a draconian law, just as this law is draconian. So I'm not talking about legislating against anything. I am talking about draconian laws have a way of coming back to bite you. So it's a very, very specific kind of law that whipping up hatred is what it is doing. And you may say that, we cannot legislate, we cannot stop legislating simply because the law may affect us one day. The issue of homosexuality, as we have all agreed, has always been here with us. It has only become an issue when religious leaders, politicians, and so on have whipped up the issue. In most cases, using it in a very populist way for their political interests. So it is the whipping up and really using the power that you have as legislators to disappear certain people is what I have a problem with. The issue of recruitment, this accusation is as old as homosexuality, or the people that stand for the rights of homosexuals. In the 1960s, activists like Harvey Milk were accused of recruiting. Here it is, in Africa now, left, right, and center, recruitment, very, very little evidence. I agree that if they can, the witness that you talked about that came here and talked about how he was recruited, I think his name is Elijah, when he was 12 and so on. The case went before court. It is currently in court. And you know why it has stagnated in court? Absolutely zero evidence from that witness. So this is something, it's a tool, a weapon that has always been used. They recruit, there's a lot of money. Any right-thinking Ugandan, I want you to give me one justification why homosexuals would want to take over the world. For what purpose? Why?
Chair, Professor, please.
Somebody, an honorable member talked about procreation, that we are about, that we are put on earth, man and woman, to procreate. So I want to ask them, are you about to criminalize Catholic priests and nuns out of existence?
Sorry, Honorable Chair, I don't feel my question is answered. Is there a law
I'm coming.
Okay.
I'm coming, yes. Yes, recruitment, because recruitment is so broad, when you entice a 14-year-old or a person below 14 to have sex with you, whether you're heterosexual or homosexual, that would be included in recruitment. So yes, that is already covered by the Penal Code.
1 minute, just 1 minute. You have 1 minute to
Yes.
wrap up. I also hand back to the
Yes,
chair.
finally.
Hand back to the chair.
Finally, the issue that the Honorable asked about, why do I think that there's a fear, this fear of homosexuals, talking about, being in public, doing it in public when, when we have heterosexuals displaying in public on February 14th, Valentine's Day, everywhere, why, he asked, what's the fear of homosexuals? And, it's a very complex issue. I don't think we have the time here, but in brief, I think when the colonialists came here and introduced this strict binary notion that human beings can only fit in two neat little boxes, you're either male or female, when that doesn't reflect the reality, it was for a very good reason. That these binary ways of thinking and having women remain at home to work, even if they work outside the home, the primary responsibility of looking after the home is theirs for free. All the labor that they perform there are not remunerated, serves very, very clear patriarchal and capitalist interests. We don't have the time to go through that, but it is very, very deliberate to insist that couples should be man and woman. It is serving colonial, patriarchal, and capitalist interests. Thank you very much.
Doctor, thank you very much for your presentation. I think you have had a good engagement with the members. Please, thank you. Madam Maria, since we have your written presentation, just kindly give us a summary, and then we give opportunity to other colleagues.
Okay.
Okay.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
My name is Bukirwa Rahom Maria. I'm a program manager at the Women's Pro Bono Initiative, and the speakers before me have belabored all the legal and social points. Like maybe to add to the issue of what Rahom from the Women's Pro Bono Initiative.
Maybe you'll assist us and you write your name to own it.
The submissions before you summarize all the issues concerning the right to privacy, issues regarding choice of adults, and the concerns raised regarding the children, as earlier stated, are addressed in the Penal Code. I'll give by analogy what happened during COVID-19, and we had the issue of teenage pregnancy. And these teenage pregnancies were as a result of heterosexual men defiling children. Yes? And there was an uproar, and there was no specific legislation that was being tabled railing against heterosexual men, because this is a case of defilement provided for in the Penal Code. Another thing that I would like to state is the notion that people who have different sex attraction, all that is about them is sex. So once you see someone who is attracted to a different sexual attraction or has a different sexual orientation, these are not people who are living lives that are homogeneous, that single lives that once they are moving the streets, all that there is in their mind is sex, sex, sex. These are people who Yes, so even just the term homosexual actually in human rights perspective is a derogatory term because they are only viewed from their sexual perspective. They're not viewed as a people. They are people and they are minority people. So the promulgation of this law is meant to be promulgated with a view of protection of rights of individuals. And yes, there is a limitation, but the law as it is right now, the anti-homosexuality bill that we intend to have passed, is not meant to protect the family in the way that you think it would be protecting it, because these people who are who have a different sexual orientation, they do not exist in a vacuum. They have family as well. They have people they relate with. Not every person that a person who has a different sexual orientation gets in contact with, they are having an intention to recruit them. Yes? And also there is a clear distinction between being a pedophile and having a different sexual orientation. That's the distinction we have failed to see. And I was very saddened not to see the same passion of members of the House when girls were being what? Being defiled. There was even a press address by the head of state where he claimed that being pregnant from defilement, it's not death. Yeah? So when you look at this law, I point to various things, clauses.
Maybe to give you information, we don't want that
Clause
to go
2(1)(c).
Just a moment.
Yes.
That issue you're talking about was even a motion brought by Honorable Sarah of Tororo. Okay? And as Parliament, we passed resolutions, we made resolutions. So it's not true that we did nothing about it.
I
didn't
say you did nothing.
What did you say? You're saying we're not
No,
pertinent.
the uproar is not the same against heterosexual
No,
men.
I think you didn't just follow up. That day the house was on fire. If you follow the proceedings.
Okay, taken. Information taken. So I maybe should refer to some of the clauses. Clause 2(1)(c) of the bill, which was already stated earlier, which makes it an offense for any person to touch another with
Submissions. And there are questions, comments. Yes, Wilson.
Thank you. And I'm sorry that Dr. Kabumba has left. No, it's still there, parents. Please help us. We are here to listen to you and make the best law that there should be. We all acknowledge and we refer to as a minority have existed since time immemorial. However, they have a majority. And in doing that, they are encroaching on our space. And they are targeting the minors. Are the laws that we have on our statute sufficient to protect our minors? You know, that's exactly what we are looking for.
Because my name, Member of Parliament, I'm not accountable.
So this side, we don't have yet our views, and you are getting views from the other side. So want you at least to report to us how outside there they misinterpret this. So because if people can misinterpret that maybe a man and a fellow man go into sexual intercourse, or it's proper whatsoever, but my concern is that misinterpretation by the public, I don't pick it more. Then there is something also you've hinted on, that this law may encourage mob justice basing on previous experience of dress code and what. So I think the laws are there to guide the public and maybe to streamline at least some culture. And those cultures at times, they divert us or they drive us to another extent. So if you state that this law is intending, or maybe it will promote mob justice, I also need your highlight over the same so that I can maybe get my argument. And your conclusion still, because me I do wish that, so with those, with that analysis, I do believe it should not be there, or we should not legislate. So, but when you leave us hanging, we shall get more time still to get your conclusion. At least you drive your conclusion that basing on my analysis, I wish it should not. So we move.
Professor talked about dressing, and the current speaker also talked about dressing and how it can be confusing. Although I feel that dressing is a cultural thing, we can have the kanzus. No. If I decide to pass, should I say, as a man, and try to maybe, I saw a video where someone dressed up as a woman.
People who are below 18, making the girls below 18 pregnant. So it was a big problem that we tried to address as far as we could. Two, you said if this bill is passed, then it will be a codified tool for this information. Now, I was thinking about so many things, but I want to pick on one. That already there is information, there's misinformation. According to you, I'm sure I'm right. So what do you think, arising from what is before us? Because we all agree that there's a problem. Whether they are the minority or the majority, there is a problem because it's on the increase. So what should be the right information according to you that this bill must address, or if it's not addressing it, it must be passed out? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank the presenter for, in a minute I've been able to flip through and go through your presentation, but I'm very interested in paragraph 11, where you come to a unilateral conclusion that the bill in its form currently contravenes Article 29 of the Constitution. And when you look at Article 29 of the Constitution, it's with regard to protection of freedom of conscience, expression, movement, religion, assembly, and association. Now, you had a very good flow in your presentation. You say the provision of the bill contravenes the right of freedom of expression and association, and you made reference to the Supreme Court decision, celebrated one at that, which considered limitations to freedoms of expression in a landmark decision of Charles Onyango Bo and Attorney General versus Attorney General. The court held that for a law to create a valid limitation of a right under Article 43, it must be acceptable and demonstrably justifiable in a free and democratic society. Now, you also made a reference to another Supreme Court decision. But now, the most important part of it is one. The court further went to hold that the commitment to freedom of expression demands that it cannot be suppressed unless the situations created by allowing the freedom are pressing and the community interest is endangered. The anticipated danger should not be remote, conjectural, or far-fetched. It should be proximate and have direct nexus with expression. You are saying the framers have not demonstrated any threat, immediate or otherwise. But when you made reference to the Kenyan decision of NGO Coordination Board versus Eric Gitari, the court acknowledges that the right of freedom of expression can be enjoyed provided there was no legitimate aim such as, one, national security or public safety, the prevention of disorder or crime, the protection of health and morals, and protection of the rights and freedoms of others. Now, at the back of our minds, we alluded to a fact that in the construction of our statutes, when we are looking at the Constitution, we'll apply the rule of harmony. Let's pick one rule. And the rule of harmony requires us to read the Constitution from the first page up to the last page. If you look at Article 2, Article 2 gives us the test. the test. Now, when you leave Article 2, you move ahead, you'll find 29. But when you look at 29, which gives you the protection of freedoms, you now go to the other provision, the one which gave the right, you go to 31. From 31, you'll go and read 43, limitations. Now, I want you to look at those provisions unilaterally, the way you have laid them. It gives you one conclusion that when you came to a conclusion that it contravenes Article 29, you have actually isolated one and left out all other provisions which have taken care of your concerns. Now, the issue is one. If we selectively apply the Constitution, then we miss the point. They are saying, yes, you have the freedom of expression. But 43 comes in with some limitations. But we are saying, do not read only 29, read plus what? 43. Other than 43, go to 31. It tells you the issue of marriages. You get it? So when we look at all of this, our input, your input should be to help us as a committee to see how best we can make the law to come in conformity of all of this. You get it? But otherwise, my submission is that the conclusion which was arrived at, in my view, and my humble opinion, is that the consideration was not given for the whole threshold, that the whole provisions of the Constitution as it ought to have been. So the conclusion arrived at, for me, I had a bit of a challenge with it in regard to that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That Supreme Court decision of India is very interesting. Dr. here told us that 95% of our society feels endangered, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, you see, you must have a reason why you don't like something. Okay? And I think we should interest ourselves and read this decision. It's very interesting. Putting into account the community interest is very key. And going by what Doctor told us, 95% don't like it. So what is their interest? Anyway, that we shall consider it. You can respond. Just 2 minutes and then.
Okay. The issue of protection of children is addressed in the Penal Code. Because if you try to, because there's a difference between legislating to guide and legislating to criminalize, to penalize. Because right now, this legislation, once it catches up with you, it is not a matter of just guidance or showing ambits. Once it penalizes you, you're facing 10 years, 2 years. You have that criminal record on you by virtue of your sexual orientation. A thing which I think should be addressed is the fact that someone does not commit a crime because they're either heterosexual or homosexual. Someone commits a crime because they are criminal. And the thresholds are there on which you have to prove the ingredients of the offense. But now, someone by virtue of their being born a certain way, because when you talk about homosexuality, you forget even the aspect of intersex people. In medical terms, which was also derogatory, known as hermaphrodites, that even those ones, you will have to, by virtue of their being born, they already have their 10 years on them. They are born criminals, yes? So, my conclusion, you said I left you hanging, is that this law is unnecessary because there are various policies and procedures within which to safeguard. Yes, I'm aware to what the parliament did concerning teenage pregnancy and everything, but there was no specific law that was going to come and say that there is this law for the teenage pregnancy, that anyone who's caught with a teenager specifically. They passed guidelines for re-entry, and the focus of the guidelines was for the rights of the girl child, were for the rights of the victims, the survivors. But now, the focus of this law is on the very existence of a sexual minority. That's the distinction between the efforts done then. They were more victim-centered than now this law, which is more focused on the very existence of someone, whether they have done a criminal act or not. The misinterpretation by the public, it's already very evident by the discussions that we're having, that even anyone who is seen with rainbow colors, various colors, that they are considered what? A homosexual, and the notion that once you are considered a homosexual, you are a pedophile, that the only thing that person who is has a different sexual orientation, the only thing that is on their mind is sex, and sex with children only, which is being a pedophile. Their existence should not be criminalized. That is what I'm saying. The same way that the fact that someone has HIV, it is not a crime to have HIV. We already have a law that criminalizes HIV, which we already have issues with. I will not go there. But this is a mirror of that law in criminalizing the very existence of sexual minorities. The issue of them going after children and everything else, that has already been delivered. But I do not think the solution for their existence, you cannot just legislate them away. You cannot. And
Madam Maria, I'm sorry. Just make a conclusion. Just conclude.
Okay, the conclusion is that this law is unnecessary.
Okay.
Yes, but the fact that you decide to consider it, we presented legal arguments.
She's very clear. According to her, the law is unnecessary because it's already provided for. Isn't it? Isn't that your submission? Okay.
Chair, protection from Fox. Protection, really.
Can we also listen to